Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this session today. So I am Makayla Merrill. I teach first grade at Chow Elementary School in Worcester County. And this session today is just going to be a overview and introduction to using the iPad in an early childhood classroom. So we're not going to get too technical or dive too deep into one particular app or anything like that. There are lots of other sessions like that happening with the Tech Summit. So if you find anything in this presentation that's specifically interesting, I definitely suggest that you go check out some of those more in-depth sessions. But hopefully what you'll get from this is if you are someone who's looking to start using the iPad in your early childhood classroom, or if you've already been using it but you're looking for some ways to kind of revamp your practices or just get some fresh ideas, hopefully you can find what you're looking for. So just to get us started, I'll give you a little bit of background of where I've been and where I'm at now. So my first year of teaching was in 2019 in first grade at Chow, and I was really surprised by the lack of independence in my first graders. I did not have experience with children that young, and I was really shocked at some of the things that they could and couldn't do on their own. The main one being that when I would give them a problem or something to do independently, there were two groups. There were the readers who could solve the problem, read the directions by themselves, and then there were the non-readers who maybe they could solve the problem, but they couldn't do it on their own because they couldn't actually read the directions or remember the directions after I had read them to them. So what ended up happening was my readers were really what I relied on to go help the non-readers and to get them through those independent tasks. But that wasn't really a sustainable solution, and because we shut down that year in spring, I never really found a solution to those problems I was having. And then with the switch to virtual learning, it was something I had never revisited until bringing the students back into the classroom later in 2020. So where I'm at now is using the iPad in the classroom in a way that directly meets the problems that I'm having. With these early learners especially, it's so important to be limiting that screen time and to not have a device in front of their faces all day. So I make sure that whatever I'm asking them to do that involves the iPad is for a specific reason and for a shortened amount of time. This is not something that I want them to be spending their whole day on. So that is definitely something that I've kept in mind, and I would encourage you to keep in mind is what are your biggest needs in the classroom? What is something that technology could solve without having students just sit passively on an app or something for 30 minutes or longer at a time? And what's also really important for me right now in the classroom is making sure that I'm not having to reinvent the wheel all the time to incorporate the iPad into the classroom. As long as it's a natural fit with my curriculum and it's something that I can use in conjunction with what I'm already doing and it saves me time, then that's great. But if it's something that I'm going to have to start from scratch and it's going to take too much of my time as a primary teacher, I just won't be able to do that. So right now, I'm making sure that it's a natural fit and that it's not taking too much of my time or the students' time, and it's actually solving a problem and not creating more of them. Especially after all of the virtual learning and digital age that we've been in. I know people have different comfort levels and different feelings about technology right now. And so the main thing that I would love for everyone to hear is that it's not supposed to be difficult and it's not supposed to take too much of your time. There's a learning curve with everything, but if it feels like a constant losing battle, then it might not be the best way for you to be using the iPad in your classroom. And if it's not something that's helping your students in a meaningful and authentic way, then it's not the best fit for them either. This should not make your job harder. It should make your life easier. And if it's not, I highly encourage you to seek out help from other people and to maybe work out another way to use it. So once you've decided that you do want to incorporate the iPad into your teaching practices and that you and your students are ready for it, or if you want to switch up what you're already doing, there are so many apps that you can download onto the iPad, but I think the best place to start are those iWork products that are already built into your iPad. There are so many things that are just ready to go specifically for the classroom without downloading an extra app that you and your students will have to relearn and manage. So the main tools on the iPad for the classroom are first the Classroom app. This is one where you can observe your student's screen through your own teacher device. So if you are giving them assignment or something to do on the iPad, you can view their screen, you can lock their screen or navigate their screen. It really gives you control as the teacher without having to constantly be up and monitoring each of their individual screens. It's all on your device so you can see and have control over what they're doing. And then next is the schoolwork app, which is the best way to push out any assignments or products to students. It creates a shared document between yourself and the student, so you each can view and work on that document. It's a really seamless way for you to send work to the students and for them to send it back to you. And there's lots of cool features within both of the classroom and the schoolwork app, so I definitely encourage you to look at a session where they dive deep into those two applications and see how you can use them in the classroom, because there's definitely some hidden gems within those. And then with the iWork tools, I think these are some of the most underappreciated apps on the iPad. I know I definitely had no understanding of what they could do until I had a mentor and the Apple Vanguard program. I definitely encourage that if you are looking to learn more about these tools. But there are so many things that they can do for your students in the classroom. And what's great about these is the toolbar for Pages and Numbers and Keynote is essentially the same. So once your students take the time to learn the toolbar in one of these apps, they'll be able to easily navigate between a lot more. And what I specifically love about the iWork apps in particular is the toolbar utilizes icons that are easy for the students to see and identify with and navigate on their own. Even in first grade with the 6-year-olds, they can find out how to insert shapes and drawings and voice recordings and things just by navigating through the picture icons. So as I mentioned a little earlier, one of the biggest problems I had in my first grade classroom was the emerging readers were unable to complete independent work when it was time to implement centers or stations, which are such a big part of the early childhood classroom. So during that time, what I really wanted to do was to be in a conference with students or in a small group and be working with them and giving my attention to them. But I was unable to do that when my students who were doing their independent work were in need of attention and assistance with the reading. So I would love to show you now an example of how I took the iWork apps and use that to solve that problem of needing students to be independent during their centers and station times. So this is what we call in my classroom station rotation. It's essentially literacy centers to review whatever standards and skills we've been working on in our core literacy time. So each station will start with a direction page just to refresh students on what they need to do and remind them that they may have to write or draw, they may have to record their voice, and they will always have to submit to schoolwork at the end of the session, end of the week, whatever it happens to be during that time. So one of the stations is typically always fluency. So on this fluency station, they have their instructions, and you see these little microphone icons because on the student's end, they can play my voice.
To hear the poem read aloud. Then record your audio and insert it.
So they'll hear my directions, and then what I loved about this is when I did fluency in my first grade classroom my first year, it never went very well because I would hand out the fluency passages and the poor students would sit there and maybe some of them could read it and the other ones can't, so they ended up usually just playing or staring at the paper for the duration of the block. But with this, I'm able to record the poem, and you'll see that my tracker is moving as I'm saying each word to help them follow along with where I'm at.
A dream can come true. Martin Luther King had a dream.
So the students can listen to the poem, get it down for themselves, and then they insert their voice, and I'm able to go back and hear their work.
Martin Luther King had a dream. For people everywhere, he wanted them to get along.
So the other problem that I had run into prior to using the iPad in my classroom was that I wouldn't know if the students had practiced the math problem or the poem or whatever it happened to be in the correct way. They could have practiced it completely wrong and I would have had no idea. And we all know that's not good for students to be practicing things the wrong way. So this helps me to review their work whenever I have the chance to go down and sit at it, and I can figure out what their miscues are or their problems are and can go back and have that conversation with them. So this is what a typical fluency station would look like in this particular example. And then we usually have some kind of vocabulary set up. So this happened to be a peaceful, not peaceful word sort. And again, with the recorded directions, so my non-readers can still have access to the work. And this started out with all the pictures over here, but the student on their own had sorted between peaceful and not peaceful, because that happened to be the vocabulary words that we had been working on. And another station would have been a rereading. So this is something, this video is inserted from YouTube, and this shape is rounded to stop them from being able to click that button and actually going into the YouTube platform. This allows them to watch the video, but staying in the numbers document. So it'll load and play as a regular web video. And the reason why I chose the Numbers app in particular is because of the tabs that you see up top here. The ability to label the tabs with emojis is really helpful, and just the picture icons in general is really helpful in my first grade classroom. Had this been one of the other documents like a Pages or a Keynote, they would have been able to have the same features, but it would have been a little bit more difficult to navigate. So having these tabs up top is easier for them to navigate through and find exactly what they need. And so to get this out to students, I would then send it through that schoolwork app. They would see it on their end, they could complete it, hit the submit button, and then I would be able to go back and see their work. And at any point during that process, as long as I've pushed it out on schoolwork, I can always go in and see their progress. So maybe after day 1, they've done one station, I can still go through and see what they did that one day for that one station, even though they hadn't technically hit that submit button yet. So using schoolwork and the iWork apps together is definitely the most successful way that I've found to get these products out to students. So that is my very brief overview of the Apple products that are already loaded on an iPad for the classroom when you decide to get started. You don't have to seek out any additional app or resource. These are Apple products on the Apple iPad, and so they work really intuitively together and with one another. And if any of these sound interesting to you, I definitely encourage you to go check out another one of the sessions that takes a deep dive and gives you specific tutorials on how to maybe create a product on one of the iWork apps or how to use Classroom or Schoolwork. Whatever you decide to do in your classroom, I encourage you to really think about what the goals are for you and your students, because there are lots of great resources out there and there are a lot of great things you can do, but if it's not a good match for you and it's not a good match for your students, then it's not going to be sustainable. And I think that really is the goal of any way you're going to use technology in your classroom. It needs to be helpful and sustainable. So some of those steps that I found helpful for me and getting started with using the iPad is to always start by identifying a problem. It's going to waste your time and your students' time if we are just using technology in meaningless and inauthentic ways. It has to directly meet a need for it to really be something that's useful and worth your time. And then for me, once I had identified that need, I really needed to find a partner or a mentor or some kind of online resource that would give me the knowledge I needed to actually create the products. There are a couple skills to learn when you're switching maybe from Microsoft products to Apple products, and it's always helpful to have someone that's more familiar with those that can help you along the way. So once I had the knowledge, then you could assemble the actual product that you'll be pushing out and create the template. I think having a weekly template that you can update from week to week, like for that station rotation, I would duplicate the document, and then I could easily switch out whatever was actually in those stations, and it'd be ready to go for another week or whatever you intended to use it for. Of course, once it's created, then you can deploy it, and that's really simple through the Schoolwork app. And there's always going to be things you need to tweak in order to sustain it. So the way that I use the iPad now with my students is different than when I started the year, and it's different than the way I used it last year. You're going to have to make adjustments and updates in order to make this sustainable for you as a teacher and for your students. So last, I want to leave you guys with the iPad can play as big or as small as a role as you want in your classroom. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, and you really have to rely on your strengths, just like you do with all the other areas of your teaching. Know yourself, know your students, and do what works best for you. And I hope you found something helpful or encouraging to get using the iPad in your classroom or to update what you're already doing. Please reach out if you'd like to learn anything more about what I touched on today. Definitely check out some more of the presenters, and good luck.